The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the deserted school grounds. The once vibrant playground now lay eerily silent, the swings swaying gently in the evening breeze. An old, dilapidated school building stood at the edge of the grounds, its windows shattered and the paint peeling from its walls. A sense of foreboding hung heavy in the air, as if the very structure itself held on to dark secrets from the past. Inside the building, the faint echo of a school bell could still be heard, a haunting reminder of days long gone. Keiko and her younger brother, Taro, stood at the entrance of the abandoned school. They had heard the rumors from their friends about the ghostly occurrences within its walls, but curiosity had driven them to explore it for themselves. Keiko, always the braver of the two, stepped forward, her flashlight casting eerie shadows on the walls. "Come on, Taro," she urged, her voice barely above a whisper. "We won't find anything just standing here." Taro hesitated, glancing around nervously. "I don't know, Keiko. This place gives me the creeps." Keiko gave him a reassuring smile. "It's just an old building. There's nothing to be afraid of." With that, she pushed open the creaking door, and they stepped inside. The air inside was musty, filled with the scent of decay and neglect. Dust motes danced in the beam of Keiko's flashlight, and the floorboards creaked under their weight. The hallway stretched out before them, lined with empty classrooms and the remnants of old student artwork peeling from the walls. They made their way down the corridor, their footsteps echoing in the silence. As they passed by one of the classrooms, Taro paused, staring into the darkness beyond the door. "Keiko, did you hear that?" he whispered. Keiko stopped and listened. At first, there was nothing but the sound of their own breathing. Then, faintly, she heard a too soft, rhythmic tapping of something against the floor. It was coming from the room ahead. They approached the door cautiously, their hearts pounding in their chests. Keiko pushed the door open with a creak, and the sound grew louder, more insistent. Inside, they saw an old piano in the corner of the room, its keys covered in dust. The tapping was coming from the piano, as if someone or something was playing a haunting melody. Taro clutched Keiko's arm, his fear evident. "Let's get out of here," he pleaded. But Keiko, driven by a mix of curiosity and determination, shook her head. "Not yet. We need to find out what's causing this." They approached the piano, the tapping growing louder with each step. Keiko reached out and lifted the lid, revealing the keys beneath. To her surprise, there was nothing there, no ghostly figure, no invisible hand playing the keys. The tapping stopped abruptly, and the room fell silent once more. Keiko let out a sigh of relief and turned to Taro. "See? It's just our imaginations playing tricks on us." Taro nodded, though he still looked uneasy. As they turned to leave, a cold breeze swept through the room, sending shivers down their spines. Keiko glanced back at the piano, half expecting to see it playing again, but it remained still and silent. They continued their exploration, moving deeper into the building. The further they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The walls seemed to close in around them, and the air grew colder. They reached the end of the corridor and found themselves in front of a large, imposing door. A plaque beside it read, "Principal's Office." Keiko hesitated, her hand hovering over the doorknob. "Do you think we should go in?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Taro shook his head vigorously. "No way. We've seen enough." But Keiko's curiosity got the better of her. "We've come this far. We can't turn back now." She took a deep breath and opened the door. The office was dark and filled with shadows. The faint light from their flashlights revealed a desk covered in papers, an old leather chair, and shelves lined with dusty books. But it was the figure standing by the window that caught their attention. A woman, dressed in an old-fashioned school uniform, stood with her back to them, gazing out into the night. Her long, dark hair flowed down her back, and her presence exuded a sense of sadness and longing. Keiko and Taro froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. The woman slowly turned to face them, her eyes hollow and filled with an unearthly glow. Keiko took a step back, her breath catching in her throat. Who are you?" she stammered. The woman's lips parted in a ghostly smile, and her voice echoed through the room. "I am the spirit of this school, bound here by the memories of the past. The echoes of the school bell keep me tethered to this place." Taro clutched Keiko's arm, his eyes wide with fear. "We need to leave, Keiko. Now." But the woman raised a hand, and the door slammed shut behind them. "You cannot leave," she said, her voice filled with sorrow. "Not until you understand the truth." Keiko and Taro exchanged a frightened glance. "What truth?" Keiko asked, her voice trembling. The woman gestured to the desk, where a stack of old letters lay. "Read them, and you will understand." With trembling hands, Keiko picked up the letters and began to read. The letters told the story of a young girl named Aiko, a student at the school many years ago. She was a bright and cheerful girl, loved by all her teachers and classmates. But one day, she disappeared without a trace. The school was thrown into chaos, and rumors of her ghostly presence began to spread. As Keiko read the letters, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Aiko had been the victim of a terrible accident, one that had been covered up by the school administration to avoid scandal. Her spirit had remained trapped within the school, seeking justice and closure. Tears filled Keiko's eyes as she finished reading. She looked up at the woman, her heart filled with compassion. "We're sorry, Aiko. We didn't know." The woman's expression softened, and she nodded. "Thank you for listening. Now, you must help me find peace." Keiko and Taro exchanged a determined glance. "We will," Keiko promised. "Tell us what we need to do." Aiko's spirit smiled, and the room seemed to brighten. "You must find the place where I fell and give me a proper burial. Only then will I be free." Keiko and Taro nodded, their fear replaced by a sense of purpose. They left the principal's office and made their way to the old stairwell at the back of the building. According to the letters, this was where Aiko had met her tragic end. The stairwell was dark and foreboding, the steps worn and uneven. Keiko led the way, her flashlight illuminating the path ahead. They reached the bottom of the stairs and found a small, hidden room. In the center of the room lay a pile of rubble and debris. "This must be it," Keiko said, her voice filled with determination. They began to clear away the debris, working tirelessly until they uncovered a small, delicate skeleton. Taro's eyes filled with tears as he looked at the remains. "We found you, Aiko." Keiko took a deep breath and gently gathered the bones. Placing them in a small box she had brought with her, they made their way back to the school grounds, where they found a quiet spot beneath a cherry blossom tree. Keiko dug a small hole and placed the box inside, covering it with earth and stones. As they stood there, the air seemed to grow warmer, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. The sound of the school bell echoed one last time, but this time it was a gentle, soothing chime. Aiko's spirit appeared before them, her expression filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. With that, she vanished, leaving Keiko and Taro standing in the soft glow of the setting sun. They looked at each other, a sense of relief and accomplishment washing over them. "We did it," Keiko said, her voice filled with emotion. Taro nodded, a smile breaking through his tears. "Yeah, we did." As they walked away from the school, the shadows seemed less menacing, and the air was filled with the promise of new beginnings. The echoes of the school bell had finally been silenced, and the spirits of the past could rest in peace. The next morning, Keiko and Taro returned home with a heavy heart, but a sense of accomplishment. They couldn't shake the eerie feeling that had settled over them. After their encounter with Aiko's spirit, the memory of her hollow eyes and sorrowful voice lingered in their minds, a constant reminder of the unfinished business that still haunted the school. As the days passed, Keiko and Taro tried to return to their normal lives, but the events of that night kept resurfacing. Keiko found herself drawn to the old school, compelled to uncover more about Aiko's tragic fate. Taro, on the other hand, was more reluctant, still shaken by the ghostly encounter. One evening, Keiko sat at her desk, poring over old newspapers and school records she had managed to find. The dim light of her desk lamp cast long shadows across the room, and the sound of cicadas outside added to the oppressive summer heat. She had uncovered a few articles about Aiko's disappearance, but they were vague and filled with speculation. Most of them mentioned the school's efforts to keep the incident under wraps, but there were no concrete details. Keiko sighed, frustration building within her. She felt as if she were chasing shadows, always just out of reach. Just then, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her friend, Yuki. "Keiko, I heard you were looking into the old school. My grandfather used to be the janitor there. He might know something. Do you want to talk to him?" Keiko's heart skipped a beat. This was the lead she had been hoping for. She quickly replied, "Yes, please. When can I meet him?" The next day, Keiko and Taro made their way to Yuki's house. Yuki's grandfather, Mr. Tanaka, was a frail old man with a kind smile and eyes that held a lifetime of stories. He greeted them warmly and invited them to sit in the garden, where the scent of blooming flowers mingled with the summer breeze. "I understand you have some questions about the old school, Mr. Tanaka began, his voice gentle but firm. Keiko nodded eagerly. "Yes, Mr. Tanaka. We recently visited the school and we encountered something. We want to know more about what happened there." Mr. Tanaka's expression grew serious. "I see. The school holds many secrets, and not all of them are pleasant. Aiko's disappearance was one of the darkest times I've ever witnessed." Taro leaned forward, his curiosity overcoming his fear. "Can you tell us what happened?" Mr. Tanaka took a deep breath, as if gathering his thoughts. Aiko was a bright and lovely girl, always eager to learn. But one day, she vanished. The official story was that she ran away, but those of us who worked there knew better. He paused, his eyes distant as he recalled the past. There were rumors, whispers among the staff and students. Some said they saw her wandering the halls at night. Others claimed to hear her voice echoing in the classrooms. But the truth was much darker. Keiko's heart pounded in her chest. What really happened to her? Mr. Tanaka's voice lowered to a whisper. Aiko was the victim of a terrible accident. She fell from the old stairwell at the back of the building. But instead of reporting it, the principal and a few teachers decided to cover it up, fearing the scandal would ruin the school's reputation. Taro's eyes widened in horror. They just covered it up? Mr. Tanaka nodded sadly. Yes, they hid her body in a small, hidden room at the bottom of the stairwell. They thought it would keep the truth buried. But Aiko's spirit remained, unable to find peace. Keiko felt a shiver run down her spine. We found her remains. We gave her a proper burial. But it seems there's still something keeping her spirit here. Mr. Tanaka's eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and determination. Her spirit will never rest until the truth is fully revealed. The people responsible for her death must be held accountable. Keiko and Taro exchanged a determined glance. They knew what they had to do. They had to find the people involved and bring the truth to light. With Mr. Tanaka's help, they compiled a list of nameless teachers and staff who had been at the school during that time. Armed with this information, Keiko and Taro set out to find them, determined to uncover the full story and finally bring peace to Aiko's restless spirit. Their first stop was the home of Mr. Nakamura, the former principal. He was an elderly man now, living in a modest house on the outskirts of town. When they arrived, he greeted them with a polite smile, but his eyes held a worried look. Keiko wasted no time. "Mr. Nakamura, we need to talk to you about Aiko." At the mention of her name, Mr. Nakamura's expression darkened. "I have nothing to say about that," he said curtly. Taro stepped forward, his voice steady. "We know what happened. We found her remains and spoke to Mr. Tanaka. We just want the truth." Mr. Nakamura's shoulders slumped and he let out a heavy sigh. It was a long time ago. I did what I thought was best for the school. Keiko's eyes filled with anger. Best for the school? You covered up a child's death. Mr. Nakamura looked away, unable to meet their gaze. It was a mistake. A terrible mistake. But what can I do now? Keiko's voice softened, but her determination remained. You can help us make it right. We need to know everything, so we can give Aiko the peace she deserves. After a long pause, Mr. Nakamura nodded. All right, I'll tell you everything. He recounted the events of that fateful day, his voice filled with regret. Aiko had been running down the stairs when she slipped and fell. Panic set in among the staff, and the decision was made to hide her body to avoid scandal. Keiko and Tara listened intently, their hearts heavy with the weight of the truth. When Mr. Nakamura finished, there was a moment of silence. Keiko finally spoke. Thank you for telling us. We need to find the others involved and make sure the full story is revealed. Mr. Nakamura nodded, tears in his eyes. I'll help you in any way I can. With Mr. Nakamura's cooperation, they managed to contact the remaining individuals involved in the cover-up. Each meeting was filled with tension and emotion as the truth of Aiko's tragic fate was brought to light as they pieced together the full story. Keiko and Taro felt a growing sense of responsibility. They had to ensure that Aiko's story was told and that those responsible were held accountable. Their final task was to present their findings to the local authorities and the community. With the support of Mr. Tanaka and the others, they organized a public meeting at the old school. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation as people gathered in the schoolyard, eager to hear the truth. Keiko stood before the crowd, her heart pounding. She took a deep breath and began to speak. We are here today to uncover the truth about what happened to Aiko. For too long, her story has been hidden. But now it is time for her voice to be heard. She recounted the events of Aiko's disappearance, the cover-up, and their journey to uncover the truth. As she spoke, she saw the faces in the crowd. Change of shock, sadness, and finally, a collective sense of determination. When she finished, there was a moment of silence, followed by a wave of murmurs and whispers. One by one, the people involved in the cover-up stepped forward, confessing their roles and expressing their remorse. The crowd listened intently, their expressions a mix of anger and understanding. Finally, Mr. Tanaka stepped forward, his voice filled with emotion. Aiko was a bright light in our lives, taken too soon. We cannot change the past, but we can ensure that her memory is honored, and that such a tragedy never happens again. The crowd nodded in agreement, their eyes filled with tears. Keiko felt a sense of relief wash over her. The truth had been revealed, and Aiko's spirit could finally find peace. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the schoolyard, Keiko and Tara stood together, their hearts filled with a sense of accomplishment. They had faced the darkness and brought light to a long-buried secret. The echoes of the school bell had finally been silenced, and the spirits of the past could rest in peace. The summer heat had begun to fade, replaced by the cool, crisp air of early autumn. Leaves turned vibrant shades of red and gold, falling gently to the ground, creating a carpet of color that crunched underfoot. The sky was a pale, washed-out blue, with wisps of clouds stretching lazily across it. Keiko and Taro stood at the entrance of the old school once more, their resolve hardened by the revelations they had uncovered. The once oppressive atmosphere seemed lighter now, as if the truth they had brought to light had lifted some of the darkness that shrouded the building. However, they knew their task was far from over. Aiko's spirit still lingered, and they needed to understand why. Inside the school, the air was cool and still. The silence was broken only by the distant echo of their footsteps and the occasional creak of the old floorboards. Keiko and Tara made their way to the principal's office, where they had first encountered Aiko's spirit. They hoped to find more clues about the events that had transpired. As they entered the office, The faint scent of old paper and dust filled their nostrils. The room was exactly as they had left it, with the desk cluttered with papers and the shelves lined with books. Keiko approached the desk and began to sift through the papers once more. Taro stood by the window, his eyes scanning the school grounds outside. "Keiko," Taro called softly, "I think there's something buried here. Look at the way the grass is uneven." Keiko joined him at the window and saw what he meant. A patch of grass near the old playground was indeed uneven, as if something had been buried there recently. They decided to investigate. As they made their way to the playground, a sense of unease settled over them. The swing swayed gently in the breeze, and the rusted merry-go-round creaked softly. They reached the uneven patch of grass and began to dig with their hands, their fingers clawing at the earth. After a few minutes, they uncovered a small wooden box. Keiko carefully lifted the box from the ground and opened it. Inside, they found a collection of old photographs and a worn diary. The photographs showed a young Eiko, her face bright with a smile, alongside other students and teachers. The diary, however, was what caught Keiko's attention. The pages were filled with Eiko's neat handwriting, detailing her thoughts and experiences at the school. Keiko began to read aloud, her voice trembling with emotion. September 15th. Today, I overheard the principal talking to some teachers. They seemed worried about something. I couldn't hear everything, but it sounded like they were hiding something. As she continued to read, it became clear that Eiko had been aware of some sort of cover-up even before her accident. She had written about strange occurrences and secret meetings among the staff. Eiko had been determined to uncover the truth, but her investigation had led to her tragic accident. Taro's face paled as he listened. Keiko, she knew something was wrong, and they silenced her. Keiko nodded, her eyes filled with determination. We need to take this to the authorities. They need to know what happened. But as they turned to leave, a cold breeze swept through the playground, and the air grew thick with a sense of foreboding. A faint whisper reached their ears, carrying a message they couldn't ignore. "Help me." They spun around, searching for the source of the voice, but saw nothing. The whisper came again, more insistent this time. "Help me." Keiko and Taro exchanged a worried glance. It was clear that Eiko's spirit was still reaching out to them, desperate for closure. They decided to head to the local police station to share their findings. The station was a small, unassuming building with a handful of officers going about their duties. Keiko approached the front desk and explained their situation to the officer on duty. Showing him the diary and photographs, the officer listened intently, his expression growing more serious with each passing moment. "We'll need to investigate this further," he said, his tone grave. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention." As they left the station, Keiko and Taro felt a sense of relief. They had done everything they could to uncover the truth and bring it to light. But as night fell and they returned home, a sense of unease settled over them once more. Keiko tossed and turned in her bed, unable to shake the feeling that something was still wrong. The whispers she had heard at the playground echoed in her mind, filling her with a sense of urgency. She finally drifted off to sleep, only to be awakened by a sudden noise. She sat up, her heart pounding, and listened. The sound was faint but unmistakable, the distant chime of a school bell. Keiko's blood ran cold. The bell was coming from the direction of the old school. She hurried to Taro's room and shook him awake. "Taro, wake up. The bell. It's ringing." Taro blinked groggily but quickly came to his senses. "We need to go back," he said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. They grabbed their flashlights and made their way to the school. In the dead of night, the building loomed ahead, its windows dark and silent. The bell had stopped, but the sense of foreboding remained. They entered the school, the beam of their flashlights cutting through the darkness. As they walked down the hall, the air grew colder and the silence became oppressive. They reached the principal's office once more and found the doors slightly ajar. Inside, the room was bathed in an eerie glow. Aiko's spirit stood by the desk, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and gratitude. "You came," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Keiko stepped forward, her heart itching for the young girl. "We found your diary, Aiko. We know what happened." Aiko nodded, her expression softening. "Thank you. But there's still one more thing you need to do." Keiko and Taro listened intently as Aiko explained. "There is a hidden room beneath the school. That's where the truth lies." Aiko led them to the old stairwell at the back of the building, the same place where they had found her remains. But this time, she showed them a hidden door, concealed behind a loose panel. Keiko pushed the panel aside, revealing a narrow passage leading down into the darkness. They descended the stairs, their flashlights illuminating the way. The air grew damp and musty, and the walls were lined with cobwebs. At the bottom of the stairs, they found a small, dimly lit room. In the center of the room stood a large wooden chest. Aiko's spirit gestured toward the chest. "Open it." Keiko and Taro hesitated for a moment, but then Keiko stepped forward and lifted the lid. Inside, they found stacks of old documents, each one detailing the events surrounding Aiko's death and the subsequent cover-up. The documents included signed confessions from the principal and teachers admitting to their roles in the tragedy. Keiko's hands trembled as she sifted through the papers. "This is it. This is the proof we need." Aiko's spirit smiled, a sense of peace washing over her. "Thank you. Now I can finally rest." With those words, Aiko's spirit began to fade, her form becoming translucent before disappearing entirely. Keiko and Tara stood in the dim light, a sense of relief and sadness filling the room. They had uncovered the truth and given Aiko the closure she needed. As they left the hidden room and made their way back to the surface, the oppressive atmosphere that had hung over the school seemed to lift. The air felt lighter, and the sense of foreboding was gone. Keiko and Tara returned home, the weight of their journey lifting from their shoulders. The next morning, they took the documents to the police station, ensuring that the truth would be known and justice would be served. As they walked away from the station, Keiko felt a sense of peace. They had done everything they could to honor Aiko's memory and bring light to the darkness that had shrouded the old school for so long. The echoes of the school bell had finally been silenced, and the spirits of the past could rest in peace. But deep down, Keiko knew that the journey had changed them both. They had faced the darkness and come out stronger, their bond as siblings fortified by the trials they had endured. As they walked home, the autumn leaves rustling around them, they knew that they would always carry a piece of Aiko's story with them, a reminder of the courage it took to uncover the truth and the importance of never letting it be forgotten. The chill of late autumn had set in, casting a somber mood over the town. The once vibrant leaves now lay in decaying piles along the streets, and a grey, overcast sky loomed above. Keiko and Taro walked the familiar path to the old school, their steps heavy with the weight of their mission. They were determined to ensure that the truth about Aiko's tragic fate was acknowledged by all, and that her spirit could finally rest in peace. As they approached the school, a sense of foreboding settled over them. The building stood as a silent sentinel of the past, its windows dark and its structure weathered. They had been here many times before, but today felt different. Today, they were not just uncovering the past, they were confronting it. The entrance hall was just as they remembered it, with the faint scent of decay hanging in the air. Their footsteps echoed through the empty corridors. As they made their way to the principal's office, where they had discovered Aiko's diary and the hidden documents, the room was dimly lit, the fading afternoon light casting long shadows across the floor. Keiko set the documents on the desk, arranging them neatly for the upcoming meeting with the authorities and the local community. They had organized a public meeting to reveal the truth about Aiko's death and the subsequent cover-up. As the minutes ticked by, people began to arrive. Mr. Tanaka, Yuki, and a few other former teachers who had been at the school during Aiko's time filed into the room, their faces a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. The local police officers who had been investigating the case were also present, their expressions stern but focused. Keiko took a deep breath and began to speak. "Thank you all for coming. We are here to finally bring light to a tragedy that has been hidden for too long. This is about giving Aiko the justice she deserves." She recounted the events they had uncovered, starting with Aiko's diary, entries and leading up to the discovery of the hidden room and the documents within. The room was silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Mr. Nakamura, the former principal, stood up, his voice trembling. "I am deeply sorry for my actions. I was afraid of the scandal, and I made a terrible decision. I hope you can find it in your hearts to forgive me." His confession was met with a mixture of anger and sadness. The community had been wronged, and the sense of betrayal was palpable. However, there was also a sense of relief that the truth was finally out. One of the police officers stepped forward, addressing the crowd. "We will ensure that those responsible are held accountable. This is not just about justice for Aiko, but about ensuring that something like this never happens again." As the meeting continued, Keiko and Taro felt a sense of closure begin to settle in. They had done everything they could to honor Aiko's memory and bring the truth to light. After the meeting, Keiko and Taro stayed behind, standing in the now empty office. The weight of their journey had taken its toll, but they felt a sense of peace knowing they had done the right thing. "Do you think Aiko can rest now?" Taro asked quietly, his eyes filled with a mix of hope and sadness. Keiko nodded, her heart heavy but resolute. "I think she can. We did everything we could." As they turned to leave, a cold breeze swept through the room, and a familiar whisper filled the air. "Thank you." Keiko and Taro froze, their eyes wide with surprise. The whisper was faint but unmistakable. Aiko's spirit was finally at peace. The old school, once a place of darkness and secrets, had become a beacon of truth and resolution. As they walked out into the fading light of the evening, they felt a sense of relief wash over them. They had faced the shadows of the past and emerged stronger for it. The echoes of the school bell had finally been silenced, and Aiko's spirit could rest. Their journey had come to an end, but the lessons they had learned would stay with them forever. The importance of truth, the power of courage, and the enduring strength of love and compassion. Keiko and Taro knew that their bond had been tested and strengthened through their trials, and they would carry the memory of Aiko with them always. As they walked home, the town seemed different, lighter somehow. The weight of the past had been lifted, and the future held the promise of healing and hope. The old school would stand as a reminder of the power of truth and the importance of justice. And as the first stars began to twinkle in the evening sky, Keiko and Taro knew that they had done their part to honor Aiko's memory and ensure that her story would never be forgotten. Their journey had ended, but the impact of their actions would resonate for years to come. The shadows of the past had been confronted, and the light of truth had prevailed.